Yo, how's it going, everybody? It's MacklinGaming, and I haven't talked about this much on the channel yet, but I am a huge Pokemon fan. Yeah, I was born in the early 90s, so when Pokemon came to the West with Red and Blue, I was at the impressionable age of like 7 or 8, and I remember playing Pokemon Blue on my fat Game Boy with no backlight on it, so you had to like either play inside with the light on, or if you're out in the car, you had to like angle your Game Boy towards the street lights. And there were even these little like clip-on lights, like worm lights, for books that you could use with your Game Boy. And some people are probably just like, what are you talking about? How does a screen not have a backlight on it? But the first few Game Boys, up until actually the Game Boy Advance, believe it or not, didn't have a backlight. It was like when the Game Boy Advance SP came out, finally Nintendo puts a backlight in their little Game Boys. But I remember playing Pokemon Blue, and everyone was playing back in the day. Blue, Red, most people probably played Red, but I remember picking Bulbasaur as my first Pokemon ever. That's why Bulbasaur is like my number one. He's back there chilling. And it was a great time to be alive. It really was. The 90s were awesome. And Pokemon is like that nostalgic time traveling time capsule for me back to the 90s when everything was much better. So fast forward to today, really like a month ago, and I saw the Pokemon Presents, and they announced at the very end a new game called Pokemon Legends Z plus A, whatever. And I was like kind of confused. I was like, what is this about? It takes place in Lumio City. I'd never heard of Lumio City. So it turns out that's from Pokemon X and Y, Gen 6, and I'd never played Gen 6. I grew up and fell out of Pokemon like around Gen 3. I loved Gen 1 and 2, Gold, Silver as well. Played those as a kid, but I did not play Gen 6. I was actually graduating college when X and Y came out, so I passed that by. Retroactively, I've gone back and I've played other generations. I played Gen 8 when it came out. I played Gen 9. A lot of people don't like Scarlet and Violet, but I actually had a really good time with it. I've played Black and White, and I played Gen 4. I played Platinum, and then I played the Brilliant Diamond remake on Switch as well. So I'm familiar with a lot of Pokemon games. And, one of the ones I just never got to was X and Y. So when I saw this release or this announcement for Pokemon Z, Pokemon Legends Z, I was like, okay, I think I have to study up here. I immediately went on eBay, looked for a complete copy of Pokemon X. So we got it in box with the manual. Pretty awesome for the 3DS. I've had a 3DS, when the remake or the remaster for Ocarina of Time came out, I had to buy a 3DS. So I've had that. So I ended up ordering this copy of Pokemon X and going through it. I just beat it yesterday, or this morning actually. And, I have some mixed feelings on it. I think it's a great game, but I think it's very much the same formula, right, as a lot of the generations of Pokemon. I'll actually give Scarlet and Violet credit for changing the basic formula of Pokemon games and how you play through them and how you explore and all that. So, but as far as X and Y goes, you start out in the setting which is like France, based on France, called Kalos, and it's all right. They did a good job modeling everything after like France, and you've got these like royal looking cathedrals and castles, and even in Lumio City in the center, there's this big tower, very similar to the Eiffel Tower, right? And you start out and you have like 3 little friends that embark on the journey with you. And I think that's cool because it's not just you and one rival, right? That kind of got old. So they were changing some things up already here in the Gen 6. But you start out and you got your 3 starters. I picked Froakie because Greninja, of course, right? And you start going through, and I think the visuals are actually really good because it's the first Pokemon game that came out on the 3DS. So they utilized that to where it's not the top down isometric camera angle, really. It's like sometimes the camera pans behind your character and he doesn't look like just like a little small guy with a big head walking around. You know, he looks like a little bit more proportionate, and the character models are better, and like all the landscapes behind you as you're walking around are better. So I think the 3DS did a lot to change up the way the Pokemon games look in X and Y. So I appreciate that. But it ends up being very similar formula. Like you go through town to town, fighting 8 gym leaders, and there's a few caves and stuff. I felt like the caves they all felt like shorter and easier. You know, they're like, let's just get through this. Right, in Red and Blue, it's like you got caves with like 3 or 4 levels to them. You don't know where you're going. You're pushing blocks through holes and dropping down. It's like the caves were daunting in like the first couple generations. But I feel like they kind of watered down the exploration in X and Y. But you know, one thing that's interesting is in X and Y, you have new Pokemon for Gen 6, but you also have a bunch of legacy Pokemon that show up in the wild and all that stuff. So you're not only walking around catching Gen 6. Like I feel like in Black and White, the original Black and White, not Black and White 2, you're only catching and exploring with Gen 5 Pokemon. So it's like, I kind of like how they brought legacy Pokemon into the wild, into Kalos Pokedex, and so there's a bunch of different Pokemon to choose from. And I ended up with a lot of like classics. You know, I had a Pidgey that I evolved into Pidgeot, and I picked Bulbasaur from the like Professor Oak guy. Forgot his name, some French guy. Oh, I think it's Professor Sycamore. And you know, he presents you with the Gen 6 starters, and then also a little bit later on the Gen 1 starters. So you get to pick one of those. And so I picked, of course, Bulbasaur, Venusaur. And, you know, the cool thing about X and Y, though, I hear a lot of people, this is their favorite gimmick, or mechanic, I should say, to be more respectful, is Mega Evolutions, you know. And after playing through the game, I like Mega Evolutions, but I don't love it. It's kind of controversial, but I don't think Mega Evolutions is like the best thing they've ever done. Actually, surprisingly, I like the Dynamax from Gen 8, the Galar region. I love the Dynamax Pokemon and Gigantamax. That was super cool. But yeah, Mega Evolution's cool. You know, maybe I didn't have the right Pokemon for it. You end up getting a Lucario from a trainer, like a gym leader halfway through. And so you get Mega Lucario, which is pretty cool. He looks all right. You know, I think Mega Charizard's really cool. I didn't end up picking him, so maybe that's why I missed out. Venusaur just gets like a taller tree stalk of the flower on his back, and like an extra like flower on his head, on his forehead. So it's all right, but it really just makes your Pokemon stronger. They don't get any new moves. You know, it's just like, do I want to make this Pokemon I already have just like a bit stronger? It's like, all right, Mega Evolution. It's cool, but not my favorite, actually. And then you end up meeting the rival groups, but like the enemy groups, Team Flare, and they're kind of funny. Like, they're not as intimidating as Team Rocket or Team Galactic from Gen 4, right? They're like really concerned with their style and how they look, and they're kind of goofy. So you just whoop them, and they're like, oh, I wasn't wearing my best suit today, so that's why I lost. It's like, all right, excuses. But their leader, Lysandra, is this guy who, you know, he's got pretty cool hair, but he has this vision, this kind of creepy mentality of like, you know, all people are greedy and they're just gonna like ruin the world with Pokemon, and they're not gonna get along with each other. So the world's gonna be better off with no more people and no more Pokemon except him. So he wants to like eradicate the world of like everyone except him, which is like kind of silly. But his some of the reasoning he gives for that is actually, you know, I can't blame him. He's like, you know, There's going to be continuing wars that break out. And, in real life, people are kind of greedy and people don't get along and we fight and there's wars going on all over the world right now. So, some of his reasoning is like, I can't argue with that. But, he wants to destroy all people in Pokemon. So we can't have that happening, right? So you just battle through the game and you end up defeating him and you defeat the 8 gym trainers. And then you get to the Elite Four, which is, placed in this really cool looking cathedral, which I do like that about the setting. Like they nailed the Pokemon League location. Like it looks pretty cool. But this was another thing for me. Like I rolled through this game. I steamrolled with my Pokemon because of a little thing called experience share. They give you the experience share right at the beginning of the game. And I feel like that made it like easy mode, really. I just like leveled up all my Pokemon without having to pull them out into battle. And, the later generations just have that built in automatically, which is cool. But the later generations, like 8 and 9, they're easier because of that. I think it's the experience share. And that really made X and Y like pretty easy for me, at least. So I'm at the Elite Four and my Pokemon are all like over 60, 65 to like 68 leveled. And I start fighting like the first Elite Four member and they only have 4 Pokemon. And then I fight all 4 of them and each one only had 4 instead of 6. I thought that was incredible. Like that should not have happened. They should have all had 6. Like I couldn't believe they just had, that's such an easy Elite Four. Like I didn't lose once, Gen 5, I remember it was brutal. It was hard because each Elite Four member is like psychic type, dark type, fighting, like all these ghosts, all these obscure types. And they all had 6 Pokemon. Like all the Elite Four from all the generations, I feel like, have had 6 Pokemon in their team. So really easy Elite Four in this game. And then you end up fighting Diantha, the champion, at the end. She's cool, but, again, my Pokemon were leveled pretty strong, and I had no problems with it. So that about wrapped up the game for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I love all Pokemon games, right? How can I not? But I think it's a solid 7 out of 10 for me, where, like, I'll give, Red and Blue, like, a 10 out of 10. Because of nostalgia. Gold and Silver, like a 9. Sinnoh, Gen 4 is like a 9. And Black and White's like an 8. And Scarlet and Violet, I'll even give an 8. So I like those better than Pokemon X and Y. But yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm glad I played it. Now I know a lot about Lumio City. And that actually gets me more excited for Pokemon Legends Z plus A. And so that's about it for my thoughts on Pokemon X and Y. Did you play these games when you were younger, or have you played them recently, like me, when you heard about Pokemon Legends Z coming out? Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.